The second thing she wants to do is to say that global warming is real and bad things are going to happen unless we have a new energy policy that moves beyond carbon. And you know it in Iowa. That's why you have biofuels and ethanol, and you're the third state in the country in the volume of electricity generated from wind. And you've only scratched the surface. But she wants to say, too, that we can only succeed in this, in saving the planet for our children and grandchildren, if we can prove that this is not drinking castor oil, that in fact embracing a clean, independent energy future will generate millions of new jobs and economic opportunity. It is the key to our own economic prosperity. If we don't do that, we will never get the Chinese, the Indians, the Indonesians, the Mexicans, the Brazilians, every other country with a lot of people coming along behind us to follow our lead. They will never agree to be poorer to combat climate change. We have to prove that we can all grow wealthier together in a more healthy, sustainable way with more jobs right here at home. Aren't you tired of sending over $300 billion a year overseas to the oil producers to use in ways you may not agree with, when you could leave it here in America and generate new wealth and jobs? So, the fourth thing in Hillary's vision is this: we cannot rebuild the middle class, restore our leadership, or reclaim the future unless we reform the government. The special interests have too much power. And there is too little accountability in the government today. I'll just give you a couple of examples in her program. First, she says that it is unconscionable that when the Medicare senior drug program was passed, the U.S. government became the only large purchaser of medicine in the entire country, legally barred from bargaining with the pharmaceutical companies for lower prices for the drugs we buy in volume. That's the cause of the donut hole for the seniors. Do you all know what that is? That's what we used to call a euphemism when I was in college. You get help with your drugs till you spend a certain amount of money, then you don't get any help anymore. It's called falling into the donut hole. In the donut hole, you buy all your own drugs until you're just about broke, and then you get to crawl out. The hole is there because we don't allow the federal government to do what the VA hospital system does, all big employers do, everybody else does, to bargain for lower prices for drugs you buy in high volume. She wants to change that and make that program something that serves the seniors, not the drug companies. And finally, in the area of reform, she said we've got to do a better job of enforcing our labor laws and our trade laws. And in order to do that, we have to return to the path of fiscal responsibility. Now, I want to say I'm always being asked, to label Hillary or somebody else, and people say, is there anything where Hillary's more conservative than the Bush administration? There is one thing. On the budget, she doesn't like these deficits. She thinks if 2 and 2 is 4 in Iowa, it should still be 4 when you get to Washington, D.C. And it's very important that you understand that one reason we don't enforce our trade laws anymore is because of the deficit. Trade enforcement has dropped to 1/4 what it was in the 90s. Why? Who do we have big trade deficits with? China, Japan, Korea, and the oil sellers. When's the last time you got rough with your banker? Think about it. Suppose on January the 2nd, when the banks open, you get up in the morning and you drink your cup of coffee, and then you have a second one to give yourself a little juice. And you amble down to the bank and walk in the front door, straight through to the bank president's office, and you slap the living daylights out of the bank president. Anybody think you could get a loan that afternoon? Now, we're laughing, but these people in Washington, they act like this money just grows on trees, it's all in thin air, and there are no consequences. That's why we can't enforce our trade law. We got to have their money every single day just to keep the doors open of America. We have given up a lot of our economic sovereignty after we paid down the debt 3 years in a row for the first time in 70 years. And we didn't have this mortgage crisis, we didn't have a lot of these problems. So Hillary does want to bring some fiscal responsibility back to America so we can enforce our trade laws, we can enforce our labor laws, and we can chart our own economic course. into the future. And I hope you will support that. That is the right thing to do for America. Oh, there's the vision. Rebuild the middle class, restore America's leadership, reclaim the future for our children, reform the government. What are the plans? Briefly, 3 of them. Her education plan is universal pre-kindergarten, something Iowa's already done for all our kids. Access for every high school graduate to college, community college, or training programs, through loans, through grants, through work programs. The best thing we could invest in. And a substantial rewrite of that Leave No Child Behind law. So she wants to change that, get rid of that requirement, recruit more properly qualified teachers, and then do something that will work. Find 20 elementary schools, 20 middle schools, 20 high schools that are succeeding at international levels in America. Find out what they're doing right. Put it all together and pay to put that in every other school in America. Replicate excellence. That will work. On energy and jobs, her program is fairly straightforward. Set up an energy trust fund to build a clean energy future. Fund it in the beginning by repealing the tax cuts that the oil companies got unbelievably just 2 years ago when oil was already $60 a barrel. They don't need that money. And use that money to accelerate the development of clean fuels, super efficient cars, and other forms of clean energy, and to make it more economical. Tell the oil companies that if they want to keep their other tax cuts, which they've had for decades, which they do not need at $80 or $90 oil, they can keep them, but only if they put that money back into building clean energy in America. If they will go from being oil companies to energy companies, they have the engineers, they have the infrastructure, they have the capacity to deliver. By all means, keep your money and help America solve that problem. But if you're going to do what you did earlier this year, which is use your tax cuts to buy more stock, buy your own stock back to jack up the price of your stock, that is not what middle-class people's hard-working tax dollars should be used for. You got to give it to us, and we will build a clean future. He also wants to dramatically accelerate making every structure in this country energy efficient, starting with all the schools and the government buildings and the hospitals, and going into every factory, eventually into every home. I do this now all around the world, so I'm not making this up. We can finance this entire effort by borrowing money and paying it off solely from the reductions in your electric bill you get from conservation. We can create millions of jobs in every county in America. And it's the only thing I can think of we can do on a decentralized basis. It is at the very heart of her energy plan. And as for health care, basically, she's got a terrific health care plan because it addresses all 3 things we need to do. We've got to cover everybody. It's immoral that we don't. We've got to bring our costs in line with our competitors or we'll go broke anyway. And we've got to do a better job of staying well. So Hillary's plan works like this. If you like the health care you've got, keep it. If you want to buy into a plan like the one that insures members of Congress and their families, you can. And it will be very large, so you cannot be discriminated against because of a prior health problem, and you can't be gouged on the premium. If you don't need that many options, you can buy into a Medicare-like plan. And that will be less expensive and have very low administrative costs. If you can't afford the premium, you're eligible for a tax credit, which will be refundable, and you'll get it anyway if you don't pay income tax. If you're an employer, like say a farmer, a small business person, and you want to help your employees, but the employer portion is too expensive, you also would be eligible for tax credits. But you must pay. You must buy health insurance. Otherwise, the first time you've got a health problem, you show up to the emergency room, your costs are larded onto everybody else, and it messes the whole system up. We've got to provide it for everyone.